The storm's gonna blow, the ground's gonna sink, and the water's gonna rise up so high, there ain't gonna be no bathtub, just a whole bunch of water.
Sort of origins of this thing was us hanging out in this abandoned squash court, 24 hours a day, animating meat and like building things out of bones, and just sort of feeling like this was the utopia, creating an island, populating it with your friends, having your life just be this sort of process of just building something out of nothing and trying to create art out of whatever was around.
There's a bunch of ideas that kind of came out of a bunch of conversations that we had. Let's just make the act of making the films an adventure, and so that in the process of making these films, we actually go and experience a life that kind of like takes us to our limits and puts us in really harrowing situations.
These ideas that we talked about doing kind of grassroots filmmaking, doing sort of this community-based collaborative filmmaking. It didn't start in New Orleans, but it really started to work there where it wasn't working in other places.
The whole universe depends on everything fitting together just right.
When I was sort of deciding that I was going to stay in New Orleans and move there, you're like telling your parents' friends, oh, I'm moving to New Orleans, and you get this sort of, why would you go there? They shouldn't rebuild that place. It's sinking. No one should live there. It's irresponsible to live there. And I sort of wanted to make a film that was celebrating that group of people that I knew and loved down there that were rebuilding and refusing to get pushed out of their homes.
Why do people stay when you know that the place you live in is doomed, or you know that a person who you care about very much or you're in a relationship with is like a sinking ship? I think in the end it's like the film definitely answers that question, but I don't think that Ben knew the answer to that question at the beginning of it. So it's usually good to kind of like, I see something in my world that doesn't quite make sense to me, but which I find very compelling, and now I'm just going to go spend the next like 4 or 5 years trying to figure out like what the answer to that is, come up with my own answer, and then try to communicate it.
So we're in Montague, Louisiana, which is just about at the end of the map. When I got here, I sort of knew that this was the place where that really kind of reflected the story we were trying to tell. We set up basically our production office was here in the convenience store. The convenience store turned into a bunch of computers basically, and people typing, and then the back 16-wheeler repair shop turned into the art department. We had our wardrobe back there. I had my office in there. We squeezed the whole operation into this place, and it was I don't know, this was home. The way that we work is, instead of kind of finishing a script and having it be this kind of holy document that then gets executed line by line, the script is being written while we're casting and finding places, and it's a very fluid thing, and so it gives us the ability to, when we find someone or a person or a place that's kind of speaks to us and feels like it has the essence of the story, we're able to incorporate that. That sort of became the method. So the production model emerges from that, and I think a lot of the stories emerge from that too, this sense of sort of communities joining arms and going up against something that seems impossible is sort of an experience that we all had making the early films and making this one, and then the stories are kind of reflecting that notion that as a community you can kind of challenge some pretty fierce odds.
The day we started filming, the BP thing happened, and it was just weird because we had gone down to the most remote part of America that we could possibly find. We got all ready to make our movie, and then all of a sudden, it's like the army descended. It's like at times it felt like making a film in the middle of like a war zone. All the stuff that had inspired Ben to write the film initially about like the erosion and the way that part of the country is like falling literally into the water was real, and he had kind of made an exaggerated version of it to kind of turn it into, you know, a fantasy story, and then like reality caught up with us, and it was like, oh my God, this is actually worse than what's in our film.
Yeah, so this empty space right here was kind of an important location because this is where my truck blew up. This one day my sister came down in the truck and it was like smoking black, and we pulled it up here and she walked out and got about 20 feet away, and we heard this boom and the whole thing just exploded right here in the yard. We cut the back of the truck off and turned that into the boat that kind of is that they travel around on in the film. We're sort of trying to live the movie as we make it, and so anything that happens to us, we're trying to kind of incorporate that into the story and into the way we build things. And you know, the truck was probably the best example of that. All right. This is the high security, you know, you have to have a special fingerprint in order to pull this bolt out. And yeah, so I think this is the scenic department right here. That's where we did all our painting. Having the producers in the same structure as the painters and all that, it's kind of essential to the way that we work. There's no kind of hierarchy. It's like everybody, you know, when the painters need 15 people, they run in the office and all the producers come back and throw paint on stuff, and that's kind of how things work. We wanted the film to be like an athletic event and have it to be physical and sweaty and, you know, kind of get that sort of muscle onto the screen. And, you know, I don't know, that's what's fun about making stuff is pushing yourself physically. Like I don't think I'll ever end up making a beach resort movie. I just am not that interested.
This here is an aurochs, a fierce, mean creature that walked the face of the earth back when we all lived in the cave.
You know, what I told Ray Tintori, who was the director of the aurochs unit, was, I don't know how you're gonna do this, but these have to be real animals.
We knew there was going to be some really complicated compositing, but it takes place at the very, very end, and it's about 2.5 minutes of screen time where it goes into like full, beautiful District 9 type compositing, like Children of Men type stuff. But the effects start off really, really simple and kind of Luddite, and as the film progresses, they get sort of gradually more sophisticated until by the end, it's like there's a couple shots in there that, you know, just took months to do and like were really composited like to within an inch of their life.
I gotta take care of mine.
So this is just about the only puppet used in the film. And it's only used in one shot. You know, we wanted to create one time where the aurochs actually cross into the physical world of the characters, but without it being like a composite. When we got up to that scene, the oil spill happened down here, and the booms for the BP booms were actually closer in than where our sets were, and so we had to negotiate with BP to actually get these puppets towed back past the booms that were holding back the oil, and to allow us to shoot this scene. So it was a pretty, you know, it's like you show up with like these corporate executives at BP, and they're like, okay, you know, they were trying to be very polite because they'd obviously f***ed up so badly, and so they were trying to seem like, you know, very helpful to anything that was going on down here. So they actually let us do it, and we got back there and got the shot. Going to Cannes and like wearing a tuxedo with all these other people that a few months beforehand were just like covered in sweat and muck and meat and insects, and you just kind of, I don't know, it is a thing where you look around and you're just like, what has happened? Like, how did this happen? But it's hard to process. I mean, and we're all just, you know, I think we're all very aware, like at some point, like this will be over and we'll go back into our little mud pit and have our game again.
Some really big, scary critics who like have kind of routinely ruined people's careers, you know, kind of saying these things that they got out of the movie that are things that like me and Ben, like things that me and Ben were like, oh, it'd be great to make a movie that like got this across or that functioned like this. People are getting out of it what we try to communicate, and that's deeply satisfying.
storm's gonna blow, the ground's gonna sink, and the water's gonna rise up so high, there ain't gonna be no bathtub, just a whole bunch of water.
Sort of origins of this thing was us hanging out in this abandoned squash court, 24 hours a day, animating meat and like building things out of bones, and just sort of feeling like this was the utopia, creating an island, populating it with your friends, having your life just be this sort of process of just building something out of nothing and trying to create art out of whatever was around.
There's a bunch of ideas that kind of came out of a bunch of conversations that we had. Let's just make the act of